Hello and welcome back for another episode of this season of Try This on Wisp Sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen, and we are at part 2 of the supplement overview, I guess is what we'll call it. If you did not check out last week's podcast episode, we talked about all sorts of different types of supplements as it pertained to more or less performance and also inflammation in a sense. So if you missed that, definitely make sure to go back to part 1 and start there and then come back and listen to this one because this is just going to be a continuation of that. We talked last week about things like beta alanine. We talked about whey protein. We talked about omega-3s and omega-6s and turmeric and magnesium and all sorts of stuff. So that would be a great episode to start off with. And so then today, what I said we would talk about are other questions that I get about supplements like that more pertain to general health. Because remember, as athletes, there's two sides of this. Yes, we really want to perform at the best we possibly can. But there's also this other piece, which is keeping your body healthy so that you can perform really well, but you can also do that for a long time. We just don't want to burn the candle right at both ends and then end up somewhere in the middle with nothing left. That's not ideal. And if you do some of these things now, hopefully as you continue to go throughout life, you reach that other side and are still able to, keep moving and doing all of the fun things that you like to do. So the general health side of things are going to be supplements that I get asked about all the time. Things like iron, things like antioxidants, and we'll talk about what those are. And then also we're going to end it with probiotics. I thought I would do those 3 categories. If you have questions about other ones and you would like to have me cover those, you can absolutely get in touch. And we usually give you all of our contact information at the end of the episode, but you're welcome to reach out and ask questions so that we can get them answered for you. But today, what we're going to start off with is iron. So iron is such an interesting supplement. Many athletes take iron. But on the flip side, though, there's also a lot of athletes that don't actually realize they're deficient in iron. The issue, though, is that you don't really want to take iron in a supplement if you don't have to. And if you don't need it, iron is something that you don't want to take. So it's pretty critical to have a test before you decide to start taking iron, just because it can be toxic to the body. And especially in supplement form, it's way better to get it through food. But sometimes we don't always have that option. If you choose not to eat meat, for example, or for some reason you can't eat meat. And you can get some iron from like vegetables and beans and things like that. But it's rarely at a high enough amount for an athlete with your higher needs, right? You can also find IV iron. And that's one way that I know some people who end up in an iron deficiency respond well to iron. I also know people who don't respond well to IV iron. It's where you get an IV, right? And it just, they put a supplement of some type into your bloodstream. So in this case, it would be iron, but I've also heard of like vitamin D, B vitamins, also vitamin C at very, very, very high levels. And one of the benefits of IVs as far as supplements goes is that IVs, because they go straight into your bloodstream, they bypass your GI tract. And that can be really helpful, especially if your gut is not absorbing nutrients very well and it's not really functioning at 100%. We can get you feeling a lot better, a lot faster with IV supplements because it just goes straight there. The other side of that, though, is that especially things like IV iron, some people's bodies just really do not respond well to that what I would call exogenous iron. So it's something that comes from outside of the body in, and it's in that supplement form versus coming through food. The body has in many ways, when we talk about supplements versus food, and we're going to actually talk about this again when we talk about antioxidants, but it's just very interesting because the body just responds so much differently to food and getting vitamins and minerals and all the things that it needs through food than from a supplement form. And yes, supplements can be helpful in some ways, and we've definitely learned how to leverage them and use them to help us achieve something. However, what it seems like is that there is this line that you can absolutely cross with supplements, and then that can lead to worsening of symptoms or just different symptoms popping up. And there's definitely a line where you can be just really taking too many supplements. So let's talk about why you might need iron. So iron really helps to carry oxygen via red blood cells to your muscles. This is like one of the biggest things that it does. And the reason why iron is so critical for red blood cells is not just carrying oxygen, but it's also part of what keeps your red blood cells able to also move around. Vitamin B12 and all sorts of, it's so critical for basically your blood. And if you think about that as well, it is your bloodstream that carries everything, anything that you eat, any nutrients, any vitamins, minerals, any of the things that you need. It's your blood that really carries a lot of whatever you need to wherever you need it, right? So we really want to make sure that your red blood cells are healthy. And there's many actually. If you just get a standard CBC or chem panel, which is what, if you went to your doctor's office and they said, well, we're just going to run your general blood work, usually it has a CBC, which is a complete blood count. And then also a chem panel, which is more of, it has more of like, I don't know how I would describe that, but it has more of like your white blood cells, and white blood cell count, and just all the different kinds of white blood cells of your immune system anyway. And then several other markers that we can see, how your body's functioning. And the thing is what's interesting is sometimes when those panels are run, they can actually show you if there's quite a bit of inflammation going on. And I have one patient that I saw after doing a pretty tough Ironman. We ran those standard labs, and there were some things on there that were showing that his red blood cells seemed a little bit off. And when you put all the pieces together, it was basically a very inflamed body that was dealing with essentially a trauma from an extreme Ironman. So it was a very interesting blood panel to look at. But I only say that because those are the things that can lead you down the road of, could this be an issue with iron, for example? Usually we don't see it very often in males, but we do see it a lot in females. So, and male athletes can get this because they tend to sweat a lot, and sweat is one of the ways that we can lose iron. It's not just through like bleeding, for example. And so these are the types of things that you kind of want to look out for. The symptoms of low iron are things like fatigue, which is just so vague. It's such a vague symptom because fatigue can be from almost anything, but there's also some more common ones, things like shortness of breath, as well as like feeling irritated or frustrated, or those kind of like emotional mood swings, which again, all three of these could potentially be just from not eating enough food in general. So there's that. But also some people feel like cold, like always feeling cold. Those are just kind of like a few symptoms of low iron. And low iron can, I'm trying to think if there's any other symptoms that I would say correlate with low iron. But maybe if you notice that you are bruising a lot more easily and you're just getting a lot of them, or if you're noticing, like, if you kind of look at the inners of your eyes, sometimes like if you kind of just peel that eyelid down, it should be a nice color pink, but if it turns a little bit more pale, sometimes that can be a sign of lower iron. So those are just some of the things that you can check to see if low iron might be a thing. But again, remember, we don't just do this off of symptoms. We do this off of also getting a test for iron. And you can ask your doctor to check your iron levels. Low iron can be because of, so I mentioned already that you can sweat it out. Especially if you're like a heavy sweater, you can definitely lose iron through that sweat. But there are some studies or some people, I guess, that have, suggested that menstrual bleeding or loss can, especially if you have like really, really, really heavy periods, could also impact your iron levels. Although it's kind of up in the air on that. I would say if you have really, really, really heavy periods and you also don't eat meat, then you might. And I guess if you had the trifecta of also being a heavy sweater, then that would probably set you up for a scenario where you might need iron. And that might be something you want to keep in your repertoire of things. But those are just some of the ways that we can end up low in iron. As well as I said, anytime you go through like a pretty traumatic event, which ultras and Ironmans and all sorts of races, like those big hefty races, can be somewhat traumatic events on the body, especially if they're in like high heat, for example, or if something goes wrong and you have to work yourself back from that. Those are all areas where, you might have a transient low iron state, but if you just kind of watch and wait and maybe, increase your red meat consumption for a little bit, that would probably do it, right? You likely don't need to supplement. You getting this from food is way better than getting it from a supplement. But if as I said, if eating meat is not your thing, then finding what works for you as far as from a supplement side of things is good. The other thing too that can cause low iron is kind of chronic NSAID use. So this is like your ibuprofens and things like that. Part of it is just how they can tend to use up iron and be kind of inflammatory to the body. Also, the other thing that I wanted to I'm trying to remember all of the points that I wanted to make. The other thing that I wanted to say as well is that so there's also this acute phase of inflammation in response to training that can sometimes create a release of inflammatory markers called cytokines, and those can interfere with the absorption of iron. So there's so many different layers as far as how the body is interacting with a lot of these different types of vitamins and minerals as we go through. We also know that things like iron you can absorb it a little bit better if you take it with like vitamin C. So you'll hear some people say, taking your iron supplement with orange juice, for example, which would be fine to do, but you can also just eat meat and have a good vegetable alongside it, and you would probably be able to absorb that just fine. But again, if you don't eat meat, that's okay. You might just want to make sure that the supplemental form of iron has a few different types of iron in it, as well as vitamin C, to try to enhance your ability to absorb it through the GI tract. So there are some issues with taking a supplement that I wanted to kind of just revisit before we move on, which is that part of the problem with taking an iron taking iron via supplement can be that it can increase inflammation, and it can very, very easily lead to iron buildup and toxicity. So this is just where I know I talk about this quite a bit on my Instagram, but really seeing a doctor that understands and knows how to work with athletes is pretty important, because first off, they're going to know what to screen for. And if you're chronically low in iron, they're going to know to keep checking your blood work to make sure you maintain healthy levels. And this is something that's just, if you go into your doctor's office and you say, I'm going to get off on a tangent here, but I promise this is a very, very important thing for you as far as just being able to be an athlete that advocates for yourself. If you go to your doctor and you say, I am fatigued and I'm training for XYZ, and they say, well, it's probably like, this is fatigue that's, not normal, right? Like you've noticed this has started to creep up for a while. You're just starting to feel a little bit more run down, but you're making sure that you're eating enough, but things still just don't seem right. If that's the scenario and you go to your doctor and they say, well, it's probably just because you're training, there's nothing else we can do for you, just go find another doctor. Honestly, you don't have to stick with just one doctor. And especially if they won't run a test in that scenario, just to make sure that everything's okay. And they don't run like iron, for example. But, I would just say it's time to maybe move on and try somebody else. And this is where, sometimes it's hard to find, but there are doctors that do work with athletes and they know what to screen for. So just keep that in mind. If you are noticing that things are just off and you're not getting the answers that you're looking for, that's just one thing that you can do is look for physicians and doctors that are willing to help you make sure that everything is how it should be. Then the last thing I wanted to say on this is just revisiting getting this from food versus supplements. Iron supplements can be problematic, especially when athletes don't really need them. I've seen some people suggest that, and some studies suggest that just supplemental iron can be somewhat toxic to the body, and athletes just don't respond very well. So if that is the case, and that's how you are, which not everybody's going to be that way, but if that's how you are, things like red meat are going to be really high in iron, as well as poultry, so chicken, and also seafood. You can also, I know this is not a thing that people really like to do, but this is something we used to do in the past, which was eat organ meats. I know that when I say organs, people tend to kind of like look at me like I'm crazy, but things like liver pate is something that can be made that is a great way to eat liver, and it usually tastes really good. I also will put I'll put chicken hearts into a gravy, and also even the gizzards you can put in a gravy, and you'll get the benefits from them without necessarily having to eat them. Eating organs doesn't really have to be gross, but it does take a little bit of planning to get them in a way that will make you want to eat them again. But that being said, we used to eat organ meats. Like, this used to be something that was very, very, very common. And the thing about it is that the organ meats, which are also sometimes called sweetbreads, are just so packed with nutrients, vitamins, and minerals. So it's something that is missing, I think, from our diet when it comes to the fact that a lot of us eat a lot of meat in general, but we don't necessarily get the wide variety of meat. We just eat a lot of like chicken or a lot of steak or ground beef, and then maybe like salmon. That's not a ton of variety, right? So every once in a while, if you can find a really good recipe of like, I don't know, liver pate, as I mentioned, or like putting some chicken hearts, chopped up into a gravy, it actually enhances the flavor quite a bit, but also can be very, 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 very good for you. So those are just some different ways to get iron in without needing to take a supplement. So stay with me, because we'll be right back with more after this. Okay, so the next two supplements that we are going to talk about today are antioxidants and probiotics. So antioxidants, I'm kind of like bunching into a whole. Vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin C, those are all considered antioxidant vitamins. And there's minerals as well and across the board, but vitamin C being one of the ones that's like your most common. Let's talk about what antioxidants do. So the reason why they're called antioxidants is because what can happen is we get this oxidative stress on the body. This happens in response to your training. So an increase in inflammation in the muscles can create some oxidative stress. Also, anytime you eat something off the grill that is a little bit charred, those, they're called AGEs, those can get into your bloodstream and those can create oxidative stress. Anytime you go anywhere that has pollution in the air that you breathe, that can create oxidative stress through, a certain load. And anytime you get exposed to toxins, chemicals, yada, 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 right? Oxidative stress can build up on the system via free radicals, which is what each of those do. So they each create reactive oxygen species and free radicals in the body, which then ultimately lead to this oxidative stress as what you could consider like a load on the body, okay? So antioxidants are designed to help neutralize those reactive oxygen species or free radicals that can lead to oxidative stress. Okay. The thing is though, is that that's cool. And we do need them to do that. There's actually one other thing we'll talk about before we move on, but it's great that they are able to help us do that because oxidative stress is one of the leading causes of things like cancer and aging and all those things. But the problem is that if you're taking some of these antioxidants in supplement form and you're taking them too close to your workouts, they can neutralize the oxidative stress or that those free radicals that are formed during training. But that's not necessarily what we want because we have to understand like what we're doing and what the effect is on the body and how the body responds to that. So taking this back a step, we've talked about this many times, but we'll go over it again. What happens when you exercise is you put an inflammatory stress, you put in a stimulus and that can create, it does create inflammation in the muscles. That's actually a good thing because that is what then your body uses and adapts to. It becomes stronger and fitter and faster. And whatever sport you do, that's how you get the adaptations to exercise. The problem is that if you put in antioxidants in particular into the body in around the time of exercise, you can neutralize that inflammation that's happening in the muscle belly and in the muscle cells, which you would think would be a good thing. However, it delays your adaptations to exercise. So think about it like this. If you did a workout and you left your body alone, you would get those adaptations to exercise in a few days, in a day, a couple days. But if you're taking a lot of antioxidants around that training, it might take you, a week or two in order to really see that adaptation to exercise if you do. So again, a lot of this is really, I know I say this all the time, but if we're really going to spend all the time that we do training, let's try to be efficient with that, right? Like, let's try to get the absolute most out of it that we can, because you're going to spend the time doing it. So we might as well try to get the most out of it, right? And the other thing is too, is we know that this is what happens with the body. In order for you to get that adaptation to exercise, you have to have that inflammatory response. And it's not like it's this like crazy, like, okay, if you get like a cut, for example, you have an inflammatory response. It's called acute inflammation, and that's okay. That's not bad inflammation. The problem is when we have chronic inflammation, like from eating not great food for years, or from, just having way too much stress from life in general and not, helping ourselves out with making sure we're sleeping enough and all that. There's a difference between this acute and chronic inflammation, and this acute inflammation that we can get from working out is something that we want to be there. So we don't necessarily want to be taking a ton of these antioxidant based supplements around our workouts. And so that's kind of the critical piece as far as why antioxidants around training are not great. And the thing is if you look at the back of your bottle, there's so many sports nutrition supplements that are just like the more the better. And they're sold at these like premium rates because they're, saying we've got all this stuff in it that you absolutely need. I was actually just at a friend's house and I was looking at the back of one of the supplements that they had on their shelf, and it had this like crazy long list of antioxidants on there, like all sorts of vitamins and minerals and all of the stuff. And, the instructions were to be taking it close to or around when you go and work out. And I was like, this is maybe not doing what you think it's doing, which is unfortunate, right? And a lot of them are sold at a premium price. So let's just take a step back and know that you can get a lot of this stuff from food without and the way that your body gets it from food is quite a bit different than if you take it in supplement form. So post-workout, we've talked about this before, but like whey protein with a carbohydrate is a great post-workout, like very quick snack right after you work out, because it helps to get that protein in. It helps to stimulate recovery, and it gets you started. And you also can get the fat burning effects for a little bit longer out of your body if you get that in as soon as possible. However, you also want to make sure that you're getting in a really good meal at some point within an hour, hour and a half after your workout. And that would be things like a good source of protein, a good source of carbohydrate, and maybe a veggie. We can avoid the fat at this meal, but a vegetable is not going to be the worst thing in the world. It's going to be okay to have broccoli or a side salad or something like that. That's totally fine to do, and it's okay to get it from food because, again, the body just does it differently. It uses it differently than if you just flood your system with a ton of vitamin C and vitamin A and vitamin E and B vitamins and all sorts of stuff right after your workout. And I want to make sure that this is clear. Antioxidants are good, and you can take them in supplement form. You can take them at other times of the day. There are also different times in training, depending on what's going on with your body, depending and how you're responding to your training load. There may be a need for antioxidants. And the other flip side of this is that, like, there's studies that have shown that if you are low in vitamin C before you get injured, and then you have to go in for a surgery, your recovery time is going to be a lot longer if you were low in vitamin C heading into that, right? So we want to make sure that you're keeping these levels up. And for some athletes, endurance athletes, NFL athletes, you're like really just big pro people that are spending so much time training, getting in enough of these vitamins and minerals, sometimes you have to get them through supplements. So again, we want to make sure that we're thinking about when we're taking them, why we're taking them, and exactly what we need. Okay. The only other thing I was going to say on this is that before I move on to probiotics, and then we'll wrap up, is that with antioxidants, something that you do absolutely have to have is B vitamins, CoQ10, vitamin C, in order for your mitochondria to do their job. The mitochondria are your energy powerhouse cells, energy powerhouses inside of your cells. They are critical for helping you have a fast metabolism. They're critical for helping you stay healthy and to keep your cells doing their job. Mitochondria in and of themselves need antioxidants in order for them to actually make that process of generating ATP, which is energy. You experience that as energy. But they also, through their process, create reactive oxygen species. So like if you didn't eat, let's say you ate a diet of like a lot of French fries and fried chicken, and, that was like about it. A lot of white foods, even maybe not ones that most white foods now are fortified, but, if you ate just a lot of white foods devoid of a lot of color, from like vegetables and fruits and a lot of nutrient dense things, and then organ meats and a variety of different types of protein and all of that, what we've seen is that oxidative stress can build up in these mitochondria and inside the cell because there's not a lot of antioxidants coming in through food. So then what happens is those mitochondria just get really, really, really bogged down with the toxins that they create and also toxins that we get through our environment. And then that's when chronic issues can start up. So antioxidants are pretty critical. They do have a job, and they're definitely needed in the body. They help your liver detox. They help your brain and your muscles and your heart do their job. They help the mitochondria. So I don't want you to think that you need to just throw out all of your things, but I do want you to pay attention to like two very critical things with all of this information that I gave you. Number one, use food as much as possible. Eat breakfast, eat lunch, eat dinner. Make sure you get in a really solid meal after your workout. Even if it's only an hour, make sure you eat some good food to replenish what you used, get the muscles built back up with glycogen, and get those really great vitamins and minerals and things headed into your body. Like this is a very critical thing. If you are training a lot, and if you have a test that is showing that your levels of vitamins and minerals are starting to tank, then you may want to start using some type of supplement to help you build that up, because you're not getting enough through food. Not taking that around your workout is going to be a very important piece there. But what we don't want, as I said before, is for you to work yourself into deficiencies and then end up, having issues with recovery or sickness or illness or injuries or whatever. And also, we want to make sure that you are not mitigating your adaptations to exercise, right? So we want to get as much as we can out of that as possible. So that's eat whole food. And then that's also eat whole food right after your workout, within an hour and a half or so. But the whey protein thing is okay. Just make sure that supplement, this is the second thing, make sure that supplement doesn't have a bunch of antioxidants in it that you're taking right around your workout. And then if you need to take supplements, try to take them away from that. Okay. The last bit, and this one's a little bit short. Probiotics are another one that I get asked about all the time, because GI distress, GI health are becoming such a popular topic nowadays. Probiotics are great in the sense that they can help us build up some gut diversity, and they can be helpful. But as I've said before, and as seems to be the theme in this episode today, eating and getting your bacteria from food is going to be better than getting it from a supplement. So here's two scenarios of what you can kind of build for yourself. Number one, probiotics from food. So things like cultured foods, things like pickled foods, looking at things like yogurt and sauerkraut and kimchi, and pickled foods like pickles and pickled onions and pickled eggs. And I don't know, like there's all sorts of different types of pickling things. All of those have cultures. All of those have bacteria. They can lead to us improving the bacteria in our gut. Also, every time you eat a wide variety of different types of colorful foods with different types of fibers, those will lead to needing more gut bacteria in our GI tract, in our large intestine, in order for us to break it down. So a wide variety of foods is critical. And then also eating more of those fermented type cultured foods, as well as pickled foods, are going to help us build up that gut diversity. We think that probiotics are supposed to do that, and they can sort of help. I mean, technology, I guess, in a way, is getting better at making sure that the types of bacteria that we get from supplements are tending to stick around a little bit more. But it's pretty known that the bacteria from food actually does stick around in the GI tract, whereas the bacteria from probiotics seems to have a bit of a temporary effect. It sort of has an anti-inflammatory effect as it passes through the GI tract, which is good, but it doesn't necessarily stick around as much as we would like. And as I said, yes, there are some companies that are doing some different things that may help to do this, but let's use probiotics effectively and efficiently, which is if you know you're going to be going into kind of a higher stress training season and maybe are prone to GI distress, especially around your events because of nerves or whatever, taking a probiotic around those times might actually be helpful, because probiotics can sort of mitigate the effects of intestinal permeability or stress from exercise, on the GI tract, which you can go back to several episodes before where we talked about GI distress for endurance athletes. And I talked about intestinal permeability and leaky gut and how that can cause a lot of issues for the body during exercise. And, probiotics can help with this quite a bit and help to mitigate some of those effects of intestinal permeability around exercise. That's pretty critical there. And that type of exercise is usually longer than an hour or two, kind of fairly intense endurance training, or for event like race days that are going to be multiple hours long. Probiotics can help in all of those scenarios. It's just that they just don't stick around in the gut like you would think. So instead of, and this is why I think the two parts of this episode series are pretty critical, is that so many people just kind of absent-mindedly put supplements in their body without really thinking about what they are doing. And for me, I feel like that's, number one, a waste of money. Why don't you not do that and then save that money for something else and maybe go, I don't know, do anything with it, but maybe buy some really good solid food. But no, and on that note, number two is that a lot of people tend to just supplement and then not also think about their food either, right? Like using supplements as like the fail-safe, the safety net that, if my nutrition isn't on point and I don't eat enough food, then the supplements are going to fill in all the gaps for me. Yeah, but it would be better if you ate enough food to make sure that we don't have you ending up in energy deficiency and then having issues from that, right? So I think those are just like the scenarios where supplements in general can be leveraged and used for good things, but we also need to have a good perspective on why we're using them. And yeah, I think that's all I really wanted to cover for today as far as supplements go. So that's our episode for now. Thank you so much for listening. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you have questions about certain types of supplements or other types of fueling questions, things like that you would like for us to cover, you can reach out to us at any time. You can email us at info@wispsports.com with any questions or comments. You can also reach out to either us on Wisp Sports, which you can find on both Facebook and Instagram. You can also find me at Dr. Kirstin on Facebook and Instagram, and at drkirstin.com. And in any one of those places, you can send us a message and ask a question, and I would be happy to cover it on one of these episodes. Also, it would really it does us a really big favor. I don't know how you found this podcast, but part of how people find podcasts is by liking. Somebody is, they like the episode, they share it, they review it, and that helps the podcast get up into the list of so that other people can find it. So if you have enjoyed listening to this podcast, we would be so grateful if you would leave a review and rate the podcast so that it can get out there to more people. So thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week. Take care.